Welcome to the Sean Chandler Podcast, a place to talk movies and nerd culture way too much. This is a special episode where we are talking scary movies because Halloween is just a couple days away. Joining me as always is Griffin, but he hasn't joined us yet. He will be popping in shortly, but he had to go pick up his roommate, I believe is what he said. But our special guest for this week, because he is the horror expert that I know best, it's Cody Leach. Cody Leach, how you doing?
I am absolutely exhausted. How are you?
I am also exhausted. The universe is very tiring these days.
Yes, I moved into a new house. We're still cleaning up the old house, working at the same time, unpacking. So I felt like I really haven't had a relaxed day in like 3 weeks.
Well, since you're so busy, I thought I would eat up a couple of your hours of your time to talk about scary movies. But thank you so much for joining me today. This is going to be a little bit different from the normal podcast. It's going to be intentionally a little bit more freeform, talking all things horror movies, scary movies, trying to tackle some of your questions as we kind of go through this, talking about our experience, what got us into horror movies, our favorite memories, the different trends that have happened all throughout the decades, and, hopefully answer some of you guys' questions as well. If you guys aren't aware, there is an audio version of this podcast. It should be available pretty much everywhere you find podcast, Apple, Spotify, all that fun stuff. And if you do listen to it over there, be sure to leave a rating or review so it can rank a little bit better on there. A little bit of housekeeping on here, just to give you insight onto what's kind of going on behind the scenes. I put out a post, I believe, last week about this. I'm doing a little bit of thinking about where I want to go with the podcast. I don't want it to just be movie news plus Q&A. That's never what I set out to do. And because the year 2020, it kind of messed up a bunch of stuff I did plan. And so I'm coming up with a new plan. So I don't know how many podcasts will be in the month of November. I'm rethinking a little bit of that stuff. So just to let you know what's kind of going on behind the scenes, I'm very open to your input. But John Campy is already doing movie news plus Q&A. He's been doing that for years. I've been watching it for 8 or 9 years. So I don't want to just copy what he's doing. And I never wanted to. And it's just turned into that basically by the coincidence or the set of circumstances that was this year. So
you don't have nearly enough Twitter clips going viral for the wrong reasons to say that
that's true. Maybe that's the thing that I'm missing on the podcast. I need to be way more amped up.
Robert Pattinson, you got to rant on Star Wars. We got to misspeak a couple of times.
Yeah, just have a loud noise in my ear where I just start screaming obscenities. I need a lot more viral clips for Twitter. And it's just John Campy's got me beat way, way on that level. But that's just what I don't want to copy someone else. And I want to have certain other kind of discussions going on. And the way without new releases, it hasn't been easy to do that. I kind of wanted them to be a little bit more theme-based around the new releases. And then tied to that theme, I would bring a friend in to talk about it that we could go deeper on that subject. It just hasn't worked with the way the years played out, unfortunately, so I'm rethinking a lot of that. But we can have a theme day today. So, Cody, glad you can join me to talk about horror movies. We're not really going to be talking too much about movie news today, but because this is a horror movie episode, and we did get a little bit of a teaser for Halloween Kills earlier today. I've had a bunch of people asking me, what was my take on it? Did it make me more excited, less excited? I know you have gotten even more people asking you what you thought about the Halloween Kills teaser. If you haven't checked it out yet, it's only 30 seconds long. The first 15 seconds or so, it's just kind of voice over with, little shots of feet and stuff like that. And then it goes into kind of clip mode where it shows these 1 second shots of a swing and then a head spraying blood and people behind glass, crowds of people, flashing lights, Jamie Lee Curtis for 30 seconds. These sorts of teaser trailers, they don't get me really excited. They don't add or subtract anything when it's a movie like this. We've seen the previous one, so we've already seen Jamie Lee Curtis return, so I don't get very excited about them. It's cool. It's still coming. They got to do little things to keep us excited. It is this is the week that movie was supposed to come out, so naturally they want to do something. Cody, what did you think about this groundbreaking, mind-blowing teaser trailer?
Just bringing it up, I'm even more tired than I was when we started. No, I mean it's them just throwing chum in the water to keep everybody talking about it, because now they get to keep the conversation going for another year. I tend to roll in circles where I feel Halloween is just entirely overrated, overhyped, over talked about. So I'm kind of callous to the whole thing to begin with. But I mean, even as soon as the trailer dropped, I got 2 private messages asking me to react to it. I got mentioned on Twitter. By the time I could even look at Twitter, there was already everybody losing their minds, saying it was amazing, this is incredible, showing like still shots. And I just don't. I'm with you. It doesn't really do anything for me. If this was the first one, you know,
exactly.
It's like it's comparing like the Force Awakens teaser to the Last Jedi teaser.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's like, okay, cool, Luke's back. You know, these the. But when you see Force Awakens, you're like, oh, you know, this is kind of like that. I'm like, okay, it's Michael, Jamie Lee Curtis is there. There's blood. There's Halloween stuff. I could have wrote this on a piece of paper as a prediction. I mean, there wasn't really anything in it to blow my mind. It was just.
I think that's Halloween. The thing. Like, we discussed this right before we started, but like, if we didn't have Halloween 2018 and they gave us this teaser saying, hey, we had to delay the movie, but here's our tease, and it's our first time seeing Jamie Lee Curtis in this role in 20 years. Mm-hmm. That's cool. That's exciting. If we didn't have 2018 and they're like, we're going to go back to the original, that's exciting to kind of see these first shots, because it's like, wow, and you get the vibe of kind of the atmosphere of it, the tone, the look, you know, even that there's a lot of gun cocking and stuff like that. You get all of that. Mm-hmm. But because we had Halloween 2018, we already know the vibe. We've already seen Laurie Strode return. We've already seen all the guns and that she's a survivalist. And so, like, kind of with this teaser, it didn't make me less excited. It wasn't like, oh, this movie. It wasn't anything like that. It's just that I can't say I'm more excited because, like, oh, wow, look, Jamie Lee Curtis is in this movie. Mm-hmm. She still has long hair. There's guns, like in the last one. Oh, look, Michael's in it. Cool. Right. Yeah. Right. That's what these movies are. So, you know, I don't mean to poo-poo on it. You know, I'm not as burned out as you are, but I'm not in the horror niche, so I don't kind of get as much of it, some of that as you do. Mm-hmm. And, but, you know, it's one of those ones that anytime one of these 30-second things drop, unless it's the first time we've seen any footage, I just don't get very excited. So, you know, like even at the Super Bowl, we got that 30-second trailer for all of the Marvel Disney Plus shows. So we literally got 6 seconds of each of these shows, and then a lot of logos. And I know it's 6 seconds because I've edited that footage into a ton of videos over the last 10 months. But that was exciting for me because it was the first time we had seen footage from these shows. And it's a new thing that they're doing with the MCU. Mm-hmm. But with this one, I've got 2 hours of this, the previous movie. And so when all I'm seeing is like, Jamie Lee Curtis. I've seen all those things. So I'm excited for when we get an actual trailer, but until it's an actual trailer, I just can't get all that excited for some of the stuff. But anyway, that's kind of our quick take. Did you have any final thoughts on that one? Actually, here's a question for you. Why do you hate Halloween 1978 and 2018?
Oh, man. How much time do we have? No, I got the worst treatment that I ever gotten before or since from the YouTube Halloween fandom whenever I said that Halloween 2018 was a 3.5 out of 5 movie. And
how dare you? How dare you?
I know. It only took 6 months. Crapping
on this. How dare you?
It only took 6 months for the collective horror community to catch up with me and decide that it wasn't 5 out of 5 after all.
Right.
But no, I'm just a little calloused from that experience, as well as just the constant anything regarding this franchise is like the greatest thing ever. Like there's just no there's no variation. It's everything's 10. Yeah. This teaser was the greatest thing I've seen in 2020, and it's like okay.
So yeah, I haven't had that with Alan once again because I'm not in the same niche as you, but I've had that with other things kind of connected to my stuff, like the fandom has made me enjoy something less. Like I I post actually less Star Wars videos than I probably would otherwise, especially in the year 2020 where I need kind of hit content, because every Star Wars video, no matter what you say, people are screaming at you. And it's like, okay, well, this isn't very much fun. Unless you're talking about Mandalorian, we seem to be pretty united on that one. We're pretty excited for tomorrow. Just rewatched some of season 1 right before we started here. But real quick, if some people are asking, where is Griffin? He should be joining us. He had a deal with his roommate driving to the audio shop, so he should be joining in. And if you're joining a little bit late, this one will be a little bit more freeform, kind of intentionally talking all things horror, our history with them. It's not going to be movie news based, and that's pretty intentional, kind of trying out some different vibes for the podcast for potentially the future. One thing we want to talk about real quick, Cody, can you tell us about the Autopsy stream real quick and 31 on 31?
Yes. So,
a lot of my fans, since I started joining in this year, it's new to them. So I don't think I've actually specifically had you explain all of this in your words. So if you can give me the big plug for it.
Yeah. So Autopsy stream is a group of me and 2 friends, well, 3 friends. One of them is very busy and rarely gets to join us, but more times than not, you will see 3 of us. It's just our live stream group that we talk about, much like this. We'll talk about movie news, or more often nowadays we'll do if there's like a big thing. Like the last time we got together, it was for Nolan to talk about all of Nolan's movies. But it's a live stream. And 2 years ago, when Halloween 2018 was coming out, I had the idea all year long to rank all of the Freddy movies, Michael Myers movies, and Jason movies, because that was, by the time I ranked or reviewed Halloween 2018, that was going to be the end of me reviewing all 3 of those franchises. Yeah. So it was just something I kind of had in my head. Ended up bringing it to the group and made it a group thing, and it blew up. It was very popular. Everybody loved it. There was a lot of other channels that were kind of doing their own version of it, so we kind of kept the tradition alive. Every single Halloween we pick new franchises to rank together that all add up to 31, and then this year, because of 2020, we've branched off. We invited Sean to come in for the action one. Sean had the idea of doing MCU and DCEU because it happened to add up to 31 for this small little window of time, for what it seemed, which is now going to be a longer window of time. And then he wanted to join us for the Halloween one this year, so we could talk some more horror stuff. So this, I was going to say this month, in 2 days, and Saturday, on the 31st, we're going to be ranking creature features. So we have Jaws, It, Critters, Alien, Predator, Jeepers Creepers, and The Thing, and Gremlins. So, so we're just a big, massive horror ranking talking about monster movies. You can find it on Sean's channel. You will find it on my channel. You will find it on Willis Greedia and Brian Lomax, who are my other 2 knuckleheads that I do Autopsy stream with. So keep your eyes peeled for that.
Yeah, so that's one obviously all of us have been working on these, watching all these creature features, and this was fun. When I saw the list, I was like, oh man, I hope I can get in on this one, because there's a bunch that I could get my wife to watch, and for whatever reason, she's been way more open to horror films this year than any other year. I assume it's because real life in the year 2020, with all sorts of pandemics and stuff, it's just, real life is like a horror film. She's like, yeah, this is just some nice escapism where, creatures are eating people alive. So she's watching David Fincher's serial killer movies with me, and then monsters eating people. It's been fun getting ready for it. We had a super chat come in from Rob. Hey, Rob, thanks so much. Great question. Says, Sean, we're going to hear about your NFL side hustle too, right? This is a very important piece of information. I forgot to mention this. Biggest thing that's probably happened in a while. But last week, I officially signed to join the Panthers as their safety. So I got on Twitter last week, and all sorts of headlines everywhere. Sean Chandler signs with the Panthers. Sean Chandler signs with the Panthers. It's like, what is this? And so I made some tweets about it, and some people took it seriously. They're like, dude, I didn't realize you even played football. You thought it was
you should be able to hold that whole side of your life secret.
My secret side hustle as an NFL player. So this has actually been my running joke that I do anytime I appear on anyone's podcast or anything like that. You always ask, hey, where can we find you? So what I always say is just go to YouTube, search for Sean Chandler. You'll either find an NFL player or a guy that looks like me and talks about movies. It's the guy that looks like me and talks about movies. And I've been doing this joke since before I even had this YouTube channel because he was a college football star. And so he's been around for about 7 years on my radar as this person that has the same name as me, but is 15 years younger and plays football. And so that's the story behind that one. Once again, if you're unaware of what's going on, Griffin should be joining in eventually. He just is running behind, and we'll kind of dive into some of our discussion of trends in horror throughout the years, but kind of what got us into horror at different points in time. Here's one that I thought would be fun to tackle. We had a question in the comments from Zachary. Says, what do you think is the biggest mistake current horror movies make? And we'll just go with that one question because we can't dive into all the questions. So your first impression, what do you think is the biggest mistake current horror movies make?
They forget to be scary.
What?
They're just like, here's a dark storyline and jump scares, and I mean that's one of the biggest ones. Is that one just not really feeling like a movie that's actually trying to do or say something.
Yeah. Sometimes these questions are a little bit tricky for me because horror is a big genre.
Yes.
And so there's a lot of different things you could talk about. One of the big players in horror right now is Blumhouse. And but they hit every single thing you could say about horror movies right now.
Yeah, positive and negative.
Like, I mean, I didn't watch any of their October with those 4 Amazon Prime, and I only heard terrible things about them. But then every year they will put out, without question, they will have one of the top 5 best horror movies any given year. That you just know.
It's a slow year. They're usually like 2 or 3 of them.
Right, right.
Thing.
In very different ones.
Yeah.
And so it's a little bit tough to kind of comment on some of them. I think that there's one that I think you're noticing for this year specifically is whatever you would. Did you watch Antebellum?
No. You gave me the whole story of it,
yeah.
and I was like, I can test.
So there's a trend that they're trying so hard to capture the Get Out vibe, and it's getting offensive. Like some of it's just getting gross. So Antebellum is trying really hard to have social commentary, and it does it by evoking slavery images extensively.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I put it on. I was like, I'm about to turn this thing off. Like this thing, like I don't think I can make it through this. I just want to wait till see when the twist happens. Like, where is this going? I can't watch this. And then it's like, oh, here's where we're going with it. It was like, this is not a good idea. This is not a great direction to take this. And so it felt like they were like, I've got a clever idea of how to come off important. And they're trying to make an important horror movie that, as opposed to a scary one, and just became offensive in the process. Yeah. And I think I read on Twitter, there's apparently another one that's doing the similar kind of thing of like trying really hard to have a social message, and some of that stuff is bugging me. Or not, buggy's not the right word, but it's an understatement of kind of how gross I've kind of felt Antebellum got at certain points in time. It's very artfully shot, but
it's in focus.
Yeah, it was. But so, yeah, looking at the next super chat that came in, did you have any other thoughts on horror movies these days? Actually, let's talk like you're not the biggest fan of like the Ari Aster.
Yeah, the A24.
Yeah, A24. That's probably a broader way to talk about it.
It's hit and miss with me. Like I can appreciate a slower, more artful horror film, a little bit slow, methodical, but there's a line. You know what I mean? Like Hereditary, I thought was a very good movie. It's not necessarily the most rewatchable horror movie, but I thought Hereditary was very good. And because Hereditary was very good, everybody was really looking forward to his second movie. And then Midsommar comes out, and I watched it, and I just did not enjoy it at all. I thought it was overly long, overly slow. I thought Florence Pugh was very good in it, but beyond that, there really wasn't any other character in the movie that I was really vibing with. And I felt like every single little twist and turn that the movie took, they telegraphed like
a mile
blatantly,
so far in advance.
Yeah, and it's.
I mean, they literally put like graphics up. Like,
yeah,
this is what we're about to do. This
Exactly. And that was the frustrating part about it, because it's one of those movies that, because it is artful, because it is, quote unquote highbrow, just like we were talking about with Halloween, the fandom kind of ruins it, because you come out and you go, this one just didn't really work for me. Right. I didn't come out and bash it. Like I even told you, I remember directly telling you, like, you were going to go see it, and I was like, you're going to appreciate the filmmaking, the cinematography, and the score, and you're going to think it was boring and telegraphs everything. Yeah. And you come out and you're like, I appreciate the cinematography and the score. And so, you give the movie its props, but because it wasn't the greatest thing ever, people are like, oh, you just didn't get it. You just watch slasher movies, go watch another Marvel film. This isn't for you. And that fandom of that type of horror film tends to turn me off more, because it was the same thing with The Lighthouse. I watched The Lighthouse and I'm like, this is just not for me,
right,
at all. But you can't just say that. You can't just say, hey, I appreciate the filmmaking, it's not for me whatsoever. You either have to love it or you're, incompetent.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that, and it's kind of both sides to that one. Certain movies, they fall into that category of, if you don't love it, well, you just didn't get it. Mm-hmm. Or if you're on the other side and you're kind of like more in the middle of, like, you respect things about it, but you didn't think it worked overall. Another group of people are like, oh, you should hate this movie. Like, there's a group that wants you to hate them too.
Yeah.
And that's what
you just gave it a pass because it's Ari Aster.
Yeah. Like they're trying to make an excuse, read your mind. That stuff drives me crazy.
Same.
When it comes to some of these ones. But yeah, that's where, Corfin will be on in just a moment. He just texted me, and so I'm interested to see kind of his take on these ones, because I think he really enjoyed The Lighthouse. I think he's a little bit this new kind of breed of high art, prestige horror that's been coming out from A24. I think he's a little bit bigger fan of it than you and I. We're a little bit more kind of classic in our taste in the genre. So hopefully he can kind of give a little bit of a defense. But it feels like there's a group of people that they love them because they're thematically rich. Yes. And they're like, oh man, the themes about toxic relationships in this movie are just, Midsommar, are so powerful. Mm-hmm. And every scene is just packed with themes. Like, I know what you're talking about, but at the end of the movie, I don't know that message works. Like, there's a theme, but what happens in the end? I don't think you can just say that. And as many people have pointed out, like, if you're making that point, if we just swapped the roles here, that she'd been sticking with him if you swapped it and they'd had the issues toxic, but the person was sticking with them for a long time, and then it ends the way that ends, except it's a girl in the hut.
Yeah, people
are going to respond very differently to that.
Very.
And I think that's where some of these movies that Us was a big one. Yes. That so artfully done. When it was a home invasion, I dug it. Fantastic performances. Yep. And I just thought the story, by the time you got to the end of it, just didn't make any sense.
Absolutely.
Like, there's just no logic to, like, you just like, what? I don't, huh?
It goes so specific with setting up specific rules that it paints itself into a corner. Like, if it had just kept it more broad and general, you'd be like, okay, well, they just want you to fill in the gaps with your mind. They want you to, use your imagination. And some movies can succeed with that. But yeah, I was with you with Us. Is they gave you so much specificity on how the rules of this universe are supposed to work that once you start thinking about it for more than a few minutes,
what?
Like, wait a minute. Okay, so if the regular guy gets in a car and drives for a trip, does the clone like float down the hallway?
Yeah.
Like, what's going on? Like,
and so they did something like that, and then a bunch of people, when I gave it a negative review, and I fully stand by that. That more time has passed, I'd maybe even be a little bit more negative, because I just don't think it holds up. And just even the quotes they made about it's all about this and about this, and I was like, I'm reading what you're saying your movie meant, but I don't see how this story tells that.
Yeah.
And then likewise, people being like, but the imagery, the symbolism, did you see this symbol? I did, and also it was later in the movie. I did notice that, but I guess you just don't get it. No, it's not that I don't get it. I value different things in movies. I don't value the thing that you valued. I valued something more about story, and you don't. And so that's some of the stuff that in horror frustrates me. I'm kind of dragging this out a little bit because I know Griffin will be a little bit more of a defender of these ones. So our super chat came in. Desiel Solanki just wanted to check if you pronounce my name right. You're going to say Diesel?
Diesel.
So that's my attempt. I don't know if I pronounced it right. I do apologize for, I'm sure, horribly mispronouncing your
If you don't pronounce it as Diesel, you should, because it sounds awesome.
Zachary, would you like to see an A24 produced Terminator movie with a $20 million budget? No.
I would like to see a Terminator movie with a $20 million budget, but let's not give it to A24. Let's give it to, somebody else.
Winnell. Leigh Winnell. There we go. Okay, Griffin, here. We got a question. It was targeted specifically at you. Would you like to see an A24 produced Terminator movie with a $20 million budget?
Absolutely not. That sounds terrible. Wait, didn't they already make that? It's called Upgrade.
Well, that's what we said. It's like Leigh Winnell doing a Terminator movie sounds good, but the idea of a A24, when you think A24,
I think It Comes at Night and
exactly.
All of these sorts of pretentious thoughts on some of this that I hate that idea.
No.
So it sounds like that's 3 thumbs up from us on that one. All right, Griffin. So catching up on the conversation. So the question was asked, what is the biggest mistake horror movies are making these days? So we kind of went off on a rabbit trail that Cody and I are in agreement on certain things, and I think you would be the counterbalance, but we'll come back to that in a second. What do you think are the biggest mistake horror movies are making?
Oh gosh. I really don't know, because I think one of the issues that is sort of becoming more of an issue is that everyone's trying to tap into the same like magic that Jordan Peele did when he made Get Out, and so everyone is like trying to make their own version of that film, with while completely missing the point of what made that film work. We look at a film like Antebellum that came out earlier this year. It just baffling that even was deemed acceptable. So it's like, there was, but to be fair, you look at the film at face value and you're like, okay, there's some potential in here. If you had Jordan Peele in like the director's chair or in the writing room or something like that, maybe you could have churned something out, but it just like it was just like so bad. And so I feel like or even like The Hunt earlier this year, a film that like couldn't decide whether it wanted to be, did it want to condemn, the right? Did it want to poke fun at the left? It was just like, it was very indecisive in what it wanted to do, and that's
actually what I liked about that one. I wasn't crazy about that movie, but I kind of liked it kind of drives me nuts when you have something, if you're trying to make the point that both sides are not listening to each other and exaggerating. And so that in the writer's room, they apparently had one person that was a little more on the right, one person a little more on the left, to kind of make sure that they were poking fun at both sides and some of the absurdities. So that one, I kind of did like it. I didn't love that movie, but I was a lot more positive on that one than Antebellum. But sorry, I cut you off.
No, you're fine, and I think that's fair. I think for me, what it came down to was that like, I don't care who you're poking fun at. It's just like, be witty, have like teeth.
Yes.
And it just like it did not go below just like surface level, just things that are kind of brought about in this sort of like climate that we're in. And so that's why I was kind of like, this is stupid. With Antebellum, it was just like, awful, baffling decisions. And so again, all these movies that are sort of in the same vein as like the Jordan Peele brand of humor, of horror, everyone is trying to tap into that, and they are more often than not missing the mark because they don't understand why those properties work. I mean, there's like, I think when I chatted with Leigh Winnell for The Invisible Man, I believe he said he was in a producer meeting where they were like, we want to do the next Get Out, but like for white women. And we're like, what? No, that
What does that
doesn't
even look like?
Yeah, it's like, what does it even look like? That doesn't work. And so it's just like everyone is after their own version of like this socially conscious like horror film.
I think there's I don't remember which video it's in, but Chris Stuckman in one of his reviews was talking. He just kind of very briefly went on this little tangent where he talked about how he writes a lot and he's trying to move into filmmaking a lot more and has done some shorts and is working on some feature length stuff. And so he's had some conversations and he wasn't trying to make a big point or anything, but what he said was, every time that you give a script to them, they turn back and they say, well, like, what's your big message? What's your social commentary with this? And like, they're always looking to try and ride a wave of some current social issue. And whatever movie he was talking about, it might have been even the one, Cody, you got in trouble for. Was that Black Christmas last year?
Oh, yeah.
You got it on like a meme or something you shared.
Exactly.
Like it was something. It was a movie like that. That was one of these ones where it was like
The Craft Legacy.
Oh my God. Okay, like I don't mean to.
I haven't seen it. How about you guys, if you want to go off on that one?
No, I haven't seen it either. But I just rewatched The Craft a couple of days ago, and I'm like, it's pretty dated, but like I still enjoyed it. And does it even like come close to getting to recapturing the magic of that first film?
No.
Okay, I didn't think so.
It's literally its own thing, except for one 5-second shot that ties it to the original film.
Oh yeah, and I think they showed it in the trailer, right? It's what's her face?
That's not in the movie.
What?
That is not in the movie.
What? Oh man, yeah. I was talking to Elliot from Movie Files, and he said that he legitimately thinks it might be one of, if not the worst movie he's seen all year.
I mean, I'll be honest with you. I actually surprisingly was on board for it through most of it. It wasn't anywhere close to as good as the first one, and I'm not like a fanatic of The Craft by any means, but it was entertaining enough, and it had a couple little social message things that they were going for, but it felt like they were using it well. Like there was a character in the middle of the movie that it directly affects how you view this character in a strong way. And I was like, hey, they're actually using it for story, for characters. They're not just saying like message, down your throat.
Good. Okay.
And then the last 10 to 15 minutes of the movie happen and it's message down your throat. And it's literally a movie that it's astounding how badly it goes off the rails in the last reel. You're like, what? And then it ends.
Yeah. Yeah, all right.
I'm glad I saw it for free. I'll just say that.
Yeah, I'm definitely not going to be watching it.
So yeah. The other thing we talked about while you were gone, and we're hoping to have your take on this one. We think you landed a little bit different on this one. Was the I actually don't remember where we fall on this one, but the Ari Aster horror films, in particular Midsommar, as well as Us.
Hereditary. Oh, Us.
Yeah.
Obviously, Hereditary would be the other Ari Aster film, but Us was the other one where me and Cody are on the same page.
Okay, yeah, I loved Us. I actually liked it more than Get Out. I just thought it was like really clever, and yet it was like pretty scary too at the same time. It's definitely more ambitious than Get Out, and I don't think it necessarily lands at every a point that it tries to make and whatnot. But I think I just appreciated the ambition of that film more. So, and so I was all for it. On top of just like some really creative sequences, like the obviously when she goes down into like the what are they called, the tethered world or whatever, and the whole dance sequence, I think is just like masterfully choreographed and shot. And I love Winston Duke in it, and I think Lupita Nyong'o was robbed of an Oscar nomination. She was that good.
Who was people that were nominated in the category? Do you remember?
Last year? Oh God, it feels like literally 10 years ago. So
I don't. Yeah, I mean, so my take was I acting great, the home invasion stuff great, artfully directed. But it was like the plot mechanics and that, like the logic of it in that third act. We're like, how does this make any sense? Any particular response to that?
I understand it, and I think it makes sense. I guess for me, the stuff that confused me a little bit. It has been a fair amount of time since I watched that, so I'm not going to go into specifics.
In
but
all time in the year 2020 is factored 20x. So
yeah, right. The stuff that I didn't quite get when I saw it, that the first initial viewing or whatever, I just sort of like sat on and then like tried to make sense of it. And I think the more I sort of just kind of dug into it, the more it kind of made sense to me. So that didn't bother me too much, but I understand not every dot really is connected there. So I get it being a little bit of a disappointment for some people, for sure.
Well, it's one of those things with movies that it's always odd the way that different movies, we have the ones where we just can't suspend the disbelief. Like, there's movies where people argue, how can you like this one, this, and this? And you go, like, none of that mattered to me with it. And then I watched Us, and when it started giving the plot, like, got to that third act, and they went back to the beach and the carnival and everything, and underground and the tethered, I was like, all I see are holes.
Mm-hmm.
All I can see are the plot. I can't get there with where you're going with this. But you could find 1,000 movies where I can get there.
Right,
so it's just interesting the way that kind of works.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I thought the twist in it, and like when they went back to the beach and then going into the tethered and stuff, like that was just like really genius to me. I don't know. I just, again, I wouldn't fault someone for disliking it for sure. I think for me, I was just like really, I dug what he was doing. So, but in terms of Ari Aster, excuse me, sorry.
My mother listens to this.
I know
This is either gonna be really good or really bad.
I'm sorry, Mrs. Sean Chandler's mother. I
actually, as long as we're talking about my mother, today is the 12-year anniversary of us becoming Facebook friends, my mother and I. So that's pretty cool. We got the little video and everything. We both shared it. So pretty big occasion for the Chandler family that I finally became friends with my mother 12 years ago.
Yeah, it's almost like you guys had no relationship.
None whatsoever. No relationship.
Yeah, of course.
Thank you, Mark Zuckerberg.
Yeah.
All right, back to Ari Aster.
Yeah, back to Ari Aster.
Dude, blank.
Yes. I love Midsommar so much, so much. The first time I saw that, it really just clicked with me, and I was able to relate a lot to what he was like trying to say in the film. On top of that, I just like the twisted, almost like Return to Oz approach to like a cult and stuff like that. It's definitely not as scary as Hereditary, but when the gruesome horror and the imagery comes to play, he brings it, and there's some amazing practical effects in there. And like the last shot of the film is just like hypnotic and just like, it's so good. I don't know, like that to me. I know there are plenty of people who hate it. They think it's pretentious and it's like way too long and whatever. I just ate up every second of it, and
did you watch the extended cut of it?
Yeah, and I love it. I love the extended cut. I have that like stupid little embroidered like A24 Blu-ray case for it. Like that's how much I love this movie. So I don't know.
Yeah, so I wanted to make sure to come back to this one because Cody and I were like, Midsommar sucks. It's long, the plot is simple, and people yelled at us in the comment section because we didn't like it. It's like, okay, so we represent one group of people, and me and you, actually me and both of you, tend to agree on a lot of things. So when we disagree, I thought it was important to have that other
Absolutely.
side. But I liked Hereditary a good bit more, but I wasn't crazy about Hereditary either. And with Midsommar, it just felt like they were telegraphing too many things.
Oh, sure.
And, a lot of the stuff with even kind of the themes and like all these themes about their toxic relationship. Like by the time it got to the end of it, I was like, I don't think I like the message you're sending.
Yeah.
And so there's some of those things that just kind of, I just didn't dig about it. It was also a weird experience because in my theater, it was like me and then like a family in the back, a married couple with their 5-year-old. And so, around the orgy, it got a little bit weird.
Yeah, that's really not okay. Those parents we need to call Child Protective Services or something.
Yeah.
Not good.
Yeah. All right. We had a super chat coming from Daniel Skinner. This is a question not for me, even though it is to me. Have you guys seen Tim Burton's Sleepy Hollow? I actually haven't. I haven't seen it. Griffin have you seen Tim Burton's Sleepy Hollow?
I have, yes. Actually, if you want to head over to the Film Speak channel right this second, or after we're done with this stream, you can find a 20-minute video essay that I did breaking down that film because I love it, and it's one of the more underrated Burton films in my opinion. So if you want a little bit of like festive content, there you go.
Cody, how about you? Have you seen it?
Yeah, I saw it in theaters actually. I probably rewatched it 3-4 times. It's not like a movie I love necessarily, but I'm not really a Tim Burton fan. That is one of the few of his that I do like. It's dark. I love the fact that Christopher Walken ends up being the headless horseman.
So good.
So yeah, it is one that I would recommend. Actually, I might watch it because I'm like, oh yeah, that exists.
Yes, do it. No,
And
it's good.
I haven't seen it, and there's no reason why. Like I couldn't tell you why. It's just one of those films that it's never happened that I happen to have seen it. We had a super chat also come in. Keep up the good work, Sean. By the way, it's pronounced. His previous super chat was commenting on how his name was pronounced. Dazil. Diesel is not a name in India, so some kids used to tease me by calling me Diesel. Well, Dazil. Cool. I will do my best. Do my best to try and remember that and not mispronounce it again. Okay, had another piece of horror news actually dropped today. Didn't want to cover too much movie news, but since we're talking horror, Insidious 5 is moving forward with Patrick Wilson making his feature directorial debut. This is the one that was like with the skeleton key or the lost key came out a couple years ago, right?
Yeah.
And he hasn't been in the last two movies?
Correct.
He was in the first two, and it had the kid from, I guess the kid from Endgame, but the kid from Iron Man 3 in it, was it right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I'm just making sure to get confused. So I've only watched all of these ones once, leading up to the new one coming out when I did my ranking. So I don't know this series terribly well. I remember them having an interesting little take, but one of those series that seemed to be going on a little bit too long.
Yes.
And taking this people like this weird, creepy lady that's kind of the hero. Let's make her the lead. And so the idea that, we're doing a fifth one, that is interesting to me because he's returning.
Does it say if he's actually going to be in the movie or is he just directing it?
Okie dokie. Let's see what we got here. Scott Teems wrote the script based on a story by franchise co-creator Leigh Whannell.
Okay.
Always a good sign.
That's helps.
So while you're looking for that, I think the interesting thing about this whole announcement is Leigh Whannell's directorial debut was Insidious 3, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
So it's almost like the people involved with this franchise sort of like they test the waters in familiar territory, and then like the next thing they do tends to be just like, a little bit more confident and something that really speaks to them as a filmmaker. So while it's weird that like Patrick Wilson is going to be directing a fifth Insidious movie, I kind of look at it as just like a trial run for him to get his feet wet, to get to sort of just like get a taste of what it's like to be a director, and then it's the next project that I think I'll be more excited about. And this could bode well for the franchise because the third Insidious I think is actually probably my second favorite. It's probably it's like actually really good. So and for a directorial debut for Leigh Whannell, I thought it was excellent. So if Patrick Wilson can do the same sort of thing, then I'm all in.
Says in the article, we're excited to have Patrick return as Josh to make his directorial debut in a franchise he helped to launch and to drive the story further with a capital F, into the next generation with Ty. So
I don't know what story there could be left to be told with his character. So that's the only thing that's a little odd because, even Insidious 2 kind of felt like a little superfluous, which is why I like 3 so much better because it was a totally separate thing. But yeah, I like the franchise. The fourth one is the only one that I didn't think was very good. It was still watchable, but you could tell it was, it was running on fumes at that point. But I like Patrick Wilson a lot. Almost everything that he shows up in, he elevates it somehow. So I'd be curious to see how good he does.
So the Insidious 4, that is I believe that's my worst movie experience since starting my YouTube channel. I believe so.
Interesting.
So even had a question.
Over buttered the popcorn, did they?
So
You got a
I go
little
to
too
the movie.
gassy in the theater.
So it was, I believe, a January horror movie, and that attracts a very specific crowd of people, and they are obnoxious high schoolers.
Mm-hmm.
So the theater I go to normally isn't very full, and this movie, of all the movies, and I mean big franchise movies, 10 people in the theater. I go see Insidious 4, and it's basically a packed theater with high schoolers. The row in front of me is just a group of douchebag dudes. And before the movie starts, they're just sitting there watching pornography on their phones.
Oh, wow.
Like,
What?
just like,
Why?
hey.
What?
People do that as a group.
Yeah,
Like,
right? That's
they're
so
like,
weird.
This is weird. And so it was weird. And then movie starts. First half of the movie, they're fine. It's nothing too obnoxious. And then I don't remember exactly how it plays out, but like a girl gets kidnapped, and she's laying on a table, and shirt's kind of tight, so you can see her curves. And as soon as this starts being an image that they keep cutting to, this girl on the table, and she's not naked. It's not even like a suggestive or anything. She's just a girl and on a table. So every time the girl appears, I start hearing this noise in the background. Like, what is that? And like, is someone's phone going off? Like, what is that? And then it cuts to the girl again, and you hear this thing. Like, you're not sure where it's coming from. Each time it's a little bit louder. And eventually it becomes clear every time the girl appears, some guy's playing some meme or something on his phone that's something about his nether regions becoming engorged, to put it in a way that the censors would. And he's like for his buddies. And so each time they start doing it, they start like, a little bit louder, a little bit more. And our theater's about to like kill these guys. And it was like, wait, why didn't you walk out and, go get the manager? Part of it is because I just needed to watch the movie because I had to do a review the next day. Like back in those days, I wasn't full time, and so I was going to watch the movie, go home and shoot my review, edit it, post it by 3 a.m. or something like that, and then I had to do a ranking next day, and so then I just had to watch the movie, and so anyway, yeah, Insidious. That's my primary memory of the Insidious franchise was these guys watching pornography in a movie theater with each other, and then whatever that was. Fun times.
You gotta love it. It's great.
So in just a moment, we'll get to talking about kind of what got us into horror movies and some trends throughout and we'll use that to talk about some trends throughout the decades. This one actually kind of leads in that a little bit too, but Dazil asks, are Scream 3 and 4 worth watching after 2? I believe all three of us love the Scream franchise.
Yeah, I like it a lot.
So I mean, the idea that if you liked 1 and 2, it's they're certainly worth checking out. I mean,
let's put it this way: the worst movie in the Scream franchise is. If that's your worst movie, you're doing pretty good for us.
Yeah. Compared to most horror franchises have multiple entries that you're just like, what is this? I mean, legitimately incompetent, unwatchable. I just did this 31 on 31, and I can mention a couple franchises that have some terrible entries, or only terrible entries. Sorry, Brian.
Yeah.
But Scream's not like that. Like, there's 1 and 2, I think, are significantly better than 3 and 4, but that's 3 and 4.
I'm actually a really big fan of 4 more than most
same.
people. So I think 4 is one of the best. 3 is just it's really watchable, but 3 is, I think, the very popular opinion of the worst of the 4. But then again, it's still, I mean, 2.5, 3 out of 5 movie. I mean, it's still pretty decent to watch.
Yeah, I mean, like it's. The thing I love about the Scream movies is as opposed to literally every other slasher franchise out there, like you said, like I would say 3 is the weakest one, but even that is still pretty smart in terms of just what they're trying to get at. It just does feel like a little more of a retread. That being said, like each and every one of them has like great moments, stuff to offer. They're all really fun, and I don't think any of them are really all that stale. When you take that into account and compare it to like, my God, the Friday the 13th movies, the Halloween sequels, some of the Nightmare on Elm Street sequels. Some of them are not too bad, but like, it's just sort of like it is probably the most consistent slasher franchise, for sure. So I, in regards to that question, yes, 3 and 4 are absolutely worth your time, especially for I don't know. I'm just I'm a big fan of those films.
All right, let's kind of go in a totally different direction and just kind of talk through what's kind of our experience first watching horror movies. Like what were those movies for you, and how are you introduced to that genre? Cody, do you have a prop, and did you want to go first?
Child's Play 3 was actually my first little dip into the horror world. I've told this story ad nauseum, but I remember it like it was yesterday. I came home, lived in an apartment at the time. My dad had popped in Child's Play 3, and I remember walking in the beginning of the movie. They're taking the corpse from the second movie, blood drips into some molten plastic, and then it kind of swirls, and you get the title screen. I still remember seeing the plastic swirl in the title screen, and I'm like, what is this? And I go and sit down and watch it, and then from then on, it was over. I was looking through all VHS we have. I'm like, okay, Nightmare on Elm Street, go take that one. Halloween, go take that one. And yeah, I was hooked immediately. It was very young, a lot of people would say, but for whatever reason, horror movies, especially even as a kid, never like scared me. It was never like this traumatic experience. I knew not to repeat certain things. I knew not to walk around talking about, killing people or anything like that. So I was the perfect kid to be introduced to horror at a young age. But yes, Chucky was my gateway drug.
What was your gateway drug, Griffin? Besides black tar heroin.
Right, of course, yes. Outside of
we've all been there.
The dark days with that. Well, I did go to school in the Midwest, so don't put it past me. I'm like struggling to think of like what that gateway film really was, because I think for me, there were scary moments in movies that weren't necessarily horror films that sort of like eased me into the genre in general. So like the first one that comes to mind is like the ending of Prisoner of Azkaban. The stuff with the werewolf, the stuff with like the time travel, the Grimm and whatnot. Like it's a pretty, for a younger kid, it's a pretty frightening sequence in a film, and like for the longest time I couldn't watch it. I would love the movie, but every time it got to that moment, I'd always have to like cover my eyes or like look in a corner or something, because I was like, I know I'm going to be staying up thinking that a werewolf's going to be coming into my room at night because I'm an idiot. So it's like stuff like that really was like sort of like the stuff that eased me into it. But like my parents always loved the first Halloween. And so like that would always be on during like especially during October, and so like I remember watching that and enjoying that. Slashers never really scared me because it's just like some goon in a mask like trying to kill you, and it's like whatever. But and then like Scream as well was a big one just because it was funny, and I didn't before Scream I didn't realize that like horror movies could also be kind of funny. And so it was like that sort of like introduced me to a whole other realm there. And then I don't know, I mean maybe like Evil Dead 2 sort of like falls in there as well as one of the ones that sort of like got me into it. But I can't remember like a specific movie, but I kind of know like the process that sort of like got me into loving them. I love them way more now than I think I ever did though.
So for me, my parents didn't really watch horror movies, and kind of grew up in a very churchy home where my mom wouldn't be one to be like, here, watch this movie about demons killing people. That would like we had a book called like Demons in the Toy Chest or something like that about how the Ninja Turtles were from Satan. So my mom wasn't. The story makes her sound a lot crazier than it wasn't. Like she didn't actually obviously watched a ton of normal movies. But that was where my mom when it came to horror movies, was not the one that was introducing me to things like that, and she wasn't sitting around watching The Exorcists in her free time or anything like that. So for me, it was just having cable, and on TNT and TBS, they played the Friday the 13th movies frequently. And so then I'd stay up late watching whatever action movie, and then it'd be like, oh, he's killing people. And the ones I remember the most were 3, 6, and 7. Meshed up, out of order. I wasn't quite sure exactly, because I'm just flipping channels like, oh, it's the end of this one. This is one where there's actual like buzz saw and cuts people. Oh, this is one with the lady that has magic powers, and the guy flips out of the water with chains and drag. And so that, I had just all these scattershot memories of watching the Jason movies back in the 90s. And then the other kind of key piece in it was when I was in the 5th grade, Army of Darkness came out. And so I didn't know much of anything about it, but when you're in the 5th grade and there's you're seeing these images and posters with a guy with a chainsaw and a double barrel shotgun, that's the coolest thing there is. And so we were all curious about it. So jump forward a few years, I watched it and became obsessed with Army of Darkness and then the Evil Dead movies. So basically the whole 90s was just obsessed with them. And so that's kind of my start. And then into the zeros, you started getting those team-up movies and the cornier versions. So I have very fond memories of going with a group of my most obnoxious friends to go see Jason X. That's a fun movie to watch with obnoxious people. Watching it by yourself at home, if you're in the mood for something serious, probably not the right movie. With your buddies, with a packed theater, that's fun. And then Freddy vs. Jason opening night. That was a fun experience. Just
it's a good thing they didn't have nether region memes back in those days.
Yes, that is correct. They didn't ruin that one for me. Those ones for me. But so those are just real fun memories for me. So very cool, very cool. I had a question come in on The Shining and Dr. Sleep. Saul John, Sean, we know you absolutely despise The Shining.
He is the man.
Hyperbole.
He's the man who hates The Shining. It's what he's known for most on this channel.
He has a tattoo that says "I hate Kubrick."
Uh-huh.
So I've never said that. I've never said I hate it. I've never said it's bad. I've never said any of those things. And I don't know if you're just being sarcastic and it isn't translating, but there's this very strong tendency. There's certain movies that if you don't love them, people think that means you hate them.
Yep.
Lord of the Rings. If you don't love it, it means you hate it. Godfather, if it's not in Halloween, if they're not in your favorites, that means people are like, why do you hate this movie? And The Shining is one of those movies. Why isn't this in your top 10 favorite horror movies? That's not one of my favorites. Why do you despise The Shining? I don't. The phrase I repeatedly have said, I'm just not wired for Kubrick. It's just in the implication that would mean that I hate it means that there's all sorts that's just not what that means. We all have different tastes and we're wired for different things. I'm trying to graciously say I fully respect it. It's just not for me. We know you absolutely despise The Shining and prefer Dr. Sleep. The second part of that is the correct part, that I prefer Dr. Sleep because it's wired for the way my brain works. But I believe Cody does like it. This is where I'm confused. Cody and I have the same take on The Shining. Mm-hmm. He refers to, even I think we did a review together, but gave it a lower grade than Dr. Sleep in your review together. So does Cody prefer Dr. Sleep?
Too early to say that. I think Dr. Sleep's probably more of a rewatchable movie. The Shining, you kind of have to be in the right mindset for it. But the Shining has been proven as one of the greatest horror films of all time. Dr. Sleep is just over a year old, so right. it's a little hard for me to put one over the other right now. I'm sure at some point it'll creep its way into 31 on 31, and I will have to put the stamp down on which one. They're very different. I mean, right. It's hard to even really compare them.
Right. And even though there are the third act, they go back to the hotel. I mean, even that's very different. Even the way its treatment of themes. There's a despair and hopelessness to The Shining that's not really. Doctor Sleep is more redemption. It's the other side.
One's a psychological look at somebody's descent into madness. The other one is like a glorified superhero film.
Mm-hmm. And superhero films are the best. Griffin, how about you?
I excuse me. I think Doctor Sleep more closely resembles what Stephen King was trying to get at with both novels, both The Shining and Doctor Sleep, and like sort of like overcoming, family addiction and trauma and stuff like that, and coming into your own and stuff that Mike Flanagan likes to tackle basically in every single thing that he has ever made. Whereas like the first Shining, it's good, but it doesn't really touch on that stuff that Dr. Sleep does all that much. It is more of just like a slow descent into madness, and then like the stuff where why am I blanking on his name?
Jack Nicholson.
Danny. Danny. Like when Danny's using the shine and all that stuff, it's like it doesn't really click as well as like, when it's being used in Doctor Sleep. And so I think you really do have to, while they're like great companion pieces, and I think Doctor Sleep is not only a good sequel to The Shining, it's a great it's a solid adaptation of the book. You do have to look at them. There were two separate films made by two different creators and telling two different stories. And I don't know. I think they're both really well done, like top tier psychological horror films for sure.
Yep.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of when I say I'm wired differently, just look at the things that are in my top 10 favorite movies. Look at the stuff I cover, and there's certain things I'm drawn towards, and certain outcomes I like films to have. And you see much more of that in Doctor Sleep than you do in The Shining. That, like, you look at my favorites, there's just nothing like The Shining, and they're very metaphoric.
It's hilarious how hard it is to get people to make that connection too, where it's like, how did you not appreciate Midsommar? How's that not your best? I'm like, my favorite movies of all time is The Thing, Lost Boys, Terminator 2, Rocky, and you know.
Right, and that's kind of my perspective on things is just because I'm not crazy about The Shining doesn't mean I'm right. If for 40 years people have said it's brilliant, I'm not trying to detract that. There's movies that my thought isn't, oh, The Shining is so overrated. No, it's not for me, or it doesn't connect with me the way it does with other people, and that's totally fine. And I'm not going to say, oh, it's awesome just because that's what I'm supposed to say. I fully acknowledge that's where other people are at. That's just not where I'm at. And, I watched Dr. Sleep, and it delivered some of that, even being to what Griffin was talking about of it captured a little bit more of the Stephen King side to it. The Shining movie is very much a Kubrick film based on King stuff. Whereas the other is much more of an adaptation of the Stephen King one. And, The Shining is like a very minor part of The Shining.
Yeah, I know. It's like so weird that it's even called the same thing because they barely touch on it. I would also say, and this might be controversial, but I would say Doctor Sleep is more emotionally satisfying as well.
Oh, yeah.
Like, like The Shining doesn't really pack the weight, I guess you could say, that the sequel does. And so like when Danny, can we spoil Doctor Sleep in here?
Cover your ears if you haven't seen Doctor Sleep.
So like when Danny dies at the end and he like becomes a part of that young girl's life and everything, and it's so beautiful. And it's like him as a character he comes full circle, and he's far more fleshed out than just like the kid on the tricycle who sees twin girls in The Shining,
And the other thing that I think allows for Doctor Sleep to do that is because The Shining was the descent into madness,
right?
And so it's both Danny's journey, but it's the continuation of Jack's journey. It's contrasted with Jack's descent, and that's very profound and powerful in a way that the Shining isn't, because it's building off of The Shining. So that's the stuff that I resonate in films with a lot more. Like I don't you look at the stuff that I get excited about. It's like, well, look at these deep thematics and the allegorical storytelling about the Native Americans. And if you look at the symbols on the, I don't do any of that. That's just not my thing. As opposed to character arc, story, and superheroes, and of course, children being tortured to death so that their souls can be collected. I love that. Andrew L. with the super chat. Thank you so much. What are your favorite jump scares? The best one of the year was Palmer.
From The Thing.
Oh, yes.
Blood
Okay.
test.
Yes.
Oh.
The Invisible Man had one that felt very earned, that fit into the movie, and put it in the trailer for some reason, but just it fit really nicely. I'm trying to think best jump scares of all time.
Not a movie, but the one in Hill House when the dead sister like pops in between the two sisters when they're arguing. That one always gets me because it's like so unexpected, but it is like earned because it's her basically telling her sisters to knock it off and come together over the matter. But that one is always like I've watched that series like probably like 3 or 4 times, and like every single time it consistently gets me.
There's a couple of really good ones in Signs. I like the one with the hand underneath the door, and even the one where the hand's next to him and it just kind of grabs the kid.
One of the weirdest jump scares of all time is in that movie when the alien first appears. Because it's not even a jump scare, but it functions as a jump scare. Like you're just watching it and you go, oh! And because that's like, and it just feels like the reaction of the people, and it does it so well that even though it's not a traditional jump scare of like a hand pops out at them, it functionally does that.
Yeah, there's another good one. We were talking about Insidious. The first Insidious one that got me really good in the theaters is there's a spot where I forget the actress's name for some reason, but she's Rose Byrne, and she's looking outside of the window, and you can see this person like walking back and forth outside of the window, and then out of nowhere the perspective changes and he's walking right in front of her and just stops, and you're like, whoa.
Yeah, that one's really good, and then obviously the iconic like dinner table one where like the Darth Maul whatever dude is sitting
Lipstick
behind
Demon
Patrick,
or whatever they call
him.
Yeah,
Right. He's sitting behind Patrick Wilson. That one's pretty good too.
Okay, this one's been in here a good bit. James, what's the scariest film you've ever seen? I'm really not scared by movies. I don't have an answer. And people are always like, yeah, but like when you were a kid, I don't have an answer. The first time I watched Predator, I was a little bit like, ooh, it kind of wound me up a little bit. But like I've never really been scared by movies.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I'll answer it 2 different ways. My scariest theater experience was seeing the Texas Chainsaw remake. I had never seen any of the Texas Chainsaw movies or really any movies like that kind of delve into that, torture, cannibalism type stuff. So it was very new to me. It was a pretty intense movie for the time, and it was in the dark. There was like 2 people in the theater. For whatever reason, just the circumstance of me seeing it, that movie was the scariest theater experience. I often say the scariest film for me, and it's not one that like I couldn't watch. I always watched it as a kid. But I still say the original Pet Sematary is the scariest film for me just because of what it deals with. And it's a film where the scary part of it has evolved as I've gotten older. Like it was always a little depressing. It was always, a little too close to comfort with death and grief that it talks about. When you become a father, that exponentially, when you watch that movie, you're like, oh, like just scenes that aren't really scary, where he digs his dead son up and he's just holding his body in the cold, and you're just like, oh, it hits me.
Yeah, and the stuff with Zelda always. It was never like it's like I agree with you. It's not like overtly scary, but it's like really unsettling and creepy. Some of that stuff that like it's you'll be thinking about it a little bit afterwards for sure. I think for me, similar to you guys, there's not like. I mean, there are times when like a movie has kept me up at night, but I like can't remember like each and every time. But for the most part, I don't usually get scared by stuff like that. I think The Witch was a massive one that just like unsettled the living crap out of me. And again, it's another one that's like not really all that scary because most of it is just people talking in Old English and it's a character drama for like, you know, the entirety of its runtime. But there's like the stuff at the beginning where the witch kidnaps the baby in the field and they're mashing it up and like eating it. And I'm like, that's like really graphic and disgusting. And then the stuff towards the end where Black Phillip, the voice of Satan, starts speaking, and it is like I'm getting chills just talking about that because it is so scary. It is just like a random voice out of nowhere just coming and speaking. Actually, a film that I saw earlier this year, without giving anything away, Saint Maud has a similar scene where just like a random voice comes out of nowhere, and it just really sort of like takes you back a little bit. So stuff like that, I think, is probably some of the more the scarier elements to me.
Nicholas Caldwell sent in a super chat saying, Exorcist 3 is great, also has a great jump scare.
Good
I
call.
have not seen it, so
I haven't either.
That movie, it's very underrated because you only ever hear about the first one, but the jump scare that he is referring to is one of the greatest jump scares because of the way that it's crafted. If you have plans on watching it, I won't spoil it, but essentially they lock a camera down a long hallway and you're forced to watch this scene play out for like 3-4 minutes where nothing happens, and you get so kind of like you get so settled into the fact that nothing's happening that when it does happen, it hits you like a brick in the face.
All right. One thing I want to talk about for a few minutes is the different trends in horror movies. Horror, it seems of genres, seems a little bit more so than some others to just have a real distinct eras or massive trends. So the 80s, slasher films. I mean, there's a guy with a mask killing teenagers with a knife, and you know, the icons of that. And then the late 90s, it was the Kevin Williamson, the Scream era, self kind of referential, kind of funny, aware of the genre. And then you had torture porn, you had the
remake phrase right at the same time.
The remakes, and then you had the found footage movies. Right now, and then you kind of the kind of Possession, the Conjuring stuff of the last 10 years, and then right now you have kind of the more prestige or social commentary horror films. What do you think it is that makes this genre lend so much to such distinct trends?
I think it has a lot to do with the fact that what we were talking about earlier, when horror of all the genres doesn't necessarily get the pat on the back for its successes. It's starting to, but it doesn't necessarily get the pat on the back for its successes like some of the other genres. So when they have something that succeeds, like Get Out, everybody runs to do another Get Out. So the 80s happened, Friday the 13th hits. I mean, Halloween, obviously, right before the 80s, but you have between Halloween and Friday the 13th hitting, and everyone's like, we got to make a movie like that. And then you have Nightmare on Elm Street, you have Sleepaway Camp, you have The Burning, and it's just a whole decade until it eventually burns out and people are tired of it. Then you get into the 90s, and slashers are dead. Then Scream comes out, and everybody's got to make their Scream. Same thing with, you know, the torture porn genre. You get Saw, we got to make it gross. And then you get Hostel, you get, you know, then the same thing with the remake. So it's like, I think that's really what it is that you hit a success and everybody's like, oh, and then just go and try to replicate that. And so you end up getting this chunk of years where that's all everybody is doing.
Well, I wonder how much of it is also tied to they're just cheaper to make. It's a genre that of the genres, along with, and even actually more so than comedy, because comedy is very star driven, and so then that can ratchet up the cost to the lead. So you have to pay Jim Carrey $20 million, and then you make a $10 million film, so it adds up on the budget. But with horror, so many of these classic films and these franchises that went on to just become money makers.
Yeah.
Even the most expensive Saw movie was like $15 million, $10 million. And, you know, when they started flopping, they were still making money because they spent no money on them. And so then you kind of go, okay, people are buying tickets for slasher movies, start cranking them out. They're dirt cheap to make, and therefore you can make a profit on it easy.
Yep.
Yeah, I agree with what you guys are saying. It's everyone trying to recapture the same magic that like a certain film does, and then they just kind of run it into the ground until the next new fad sort of comes about. What I will say though is I feel like horror films across the board, the one thing that usually sort of ties them together is that they all are sort of like snapshots of a certain period of time. And like while right now we are living in a more overtly like socially conscious era of horror always tries to engage with the world around us, which is, you know, I think one of the reasons why people enjoy it, one of the reasons that it's so moldable and able to adapt as well. It's just we've never seen it like as overtly as we have right now. And I'm curious how long that whole thing will be able to go on, or if it'll sort of like, you know, cause the genre to like scale back and then just like focus on just like fun, you know, mindless entertainment or something like that. So it is sort of like interesting trying to pinpoint where exactly the genre is going to go next.
Yeah. I guess maybe that is the question. Where is it headed? Because you've got several different things kind of going right now, because they're still cranking out Conjuring-verse movies. You have kind of the revival era with Halloween, and they tried to do it with Child's Play, but it didn't catch. And then, of course, you have Jordan Peele, Ari Aster, and those aren't quite the same thing, but a little bit more prestige would be that. So you have several different streams kind of going on and having some success. In that sense, is there horror kind of in a... I guess, Cody, you're the horror guy. Would you say that horror is in a strong place right now, or?
Yeah, absolutely. For a lot of reasons you just named. I mean, it's starting to get the attention. Like you're starting to see horror films get Oscar buzz. You know, if you can, I still have not seen the movie, but if you consider Shape of Water, or that came out and had the Best Picture, if you consider that a horror film, that was like a big deal. I think that might have been the first Oscar since Silence of the Lambs. You're starting to get more, you know, recognition with the performances. You get movies like Ari Aster where it's very critically, you know, lauded. You know, they come out, they're like, hey, check this thing out. And then at the same time, you have all of the genre pleasers. You have Halloween coming back, and now everybody that has been sitting on these properties for a while, like Child's Play, Candyman, that we almost got, now we have to wait a year for. Even Saw to a certain extent. They're like, hey, let's talk to Chris Rock. I think he's got an idea for Saw.
Texas Chainsaw.
Yeah,
finally getting a new one of those.
Yeah, I know, right? Totally. Going back to the beginning for the first time, too.
Yeah.
So you've got that. I mean, if you want to even talk about fan films, you've got a lot of strong things going on in fan films, notably the Friday the 13th franchise. And if that ever gets out of the court system, I guarantee you'll have one of those within 2 years. Nightmare on Elm Street, I don't imagine we're too far away from hearing an announcement with that. And then you still have another Halloween movie coming out a year after Halloween Kills. So, I mean, even if Jason has to hold the torch for us even if Michael has to hold the torch for us, I'm not going to live that one down.
I know I'm going to clip that one out.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah.
Cody doesn't know who stars in the Halloween movie
franchise, bro. Even if he has to hold the torch for us for a little while, I mean, we've got now 3 years of buffer. So yeah, I think it's in a really strong place.
Well, even talking through it, I mean, there's even more going on than I was thinking. Because I mean, Saw's a totally different era, and it feels like maybe
Scream's
more so than
coming back.
Scream's coming back. Like all of the eras that we talked about, except found footage, came up,
which I'm totally okay with not coming back right now.
Me too.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe throw that one out there. What's your least favorite of these ones? These different eras. I can't do found footage.
Found footage for sure. Close second with the supernatural, because you have the great ones like The Conjuring, but then you have a lot of dreck that's just like, hey, let's just show somebody contorting themselves in the corner for an hour and a half.
Yeah, like what?
The door closed.
Yeah, like Incarnate or something like that with Aaron Eckhart or whatever. It's just like, it's just bad. No, for sure. Yeah, I don't know where exactly it's going. I had a thought and then I lost it, but yeah, anyways, I lost it. There you go, guys.
Seems it's going in all the directions, but
right.
So yeah, I don't know, it seems like a positive to have variety And I guess the other thought I had was that then you've had the most successful horror films of all time, box office wise, over the last few years with the It movies. Yeah. I believe that those are the highest grossing by a factor.
The first one is for sure. Yeah. I don't know where the second one landed, but yeah, the first one was like way above.
It's not even in the same category as. I mean, it just killed it, literally, in multiple senses. But yeah, so. It's a genre that seems to be in a pretty interesting little place. All right, we got several questions in here, and we'll try and close out in just a little bit. So if you guys have any questions, you want to throw them in here. Today we're only talking about horror, so people asking about The Mandalorian, Ahsoka Tano, all kinds of stuff like that. Not the right podcast, but there will be future days for that. Ryan Geisen with Super Chat, thank you so much. Have you guys seen The Strangers from 2008? I have not.
I'm never a fan.
I have not seen The Strangers. It's one that always pops up, but I'm always like...
And I don't know why. It's not a good movie. I'm sorry. When you watch the first Strangers, it has good sound design for a few moments because you have Liv Tyler, you have whatever hell his name is that are in this house. It's this big open house by itself. And then you have this really loud knock on the door. And it's one of those movies where if you listen to it in the surround sound, it'll probably make you jump. You're like, oh... And the whole concept of these people that are just kind of terrorizing them visually is cool. But the movie is just terrible. Like, when you watch a horror film, there's a certain amount of disbelief because you understand that the plot has to keep going for 2 hours. But when you have a movie where literally every single decision that the main characters make is like the most retarded decision that you could possibly make in that given time, it takes you out of it. And that's both Strangers movies. The second one is just easier to watch because the second one's more flash. It's got a little bit more of that like 80s neon kind of thing going for it. It's a little bit more like classic slasher. So the second one I could say to recommend. The first one, I have never understood that movie's fandom at all.
All right.
Well, there you have it.
All right. We got another super chat come in. This is a good name here. Poop Die Loop Whoop Diddy Scoop Fruit asks, scariest moment in non-horror film you saw as a kid? This is actually pretty easy. I have repeatedly said I don't get scared by movies. I've never been scared by movies.
Kalima.
Of all the things to actually kind of freak me out inside of a movie, it's the probe in Star Trek IV: The Voyage Home. Which, if you've seen Star Trek IV: The Voyage Home, or even know its reputation, it's the one known as the one with the whales, where the crew travels back to the 1980s, and it's a fish out of water comedy. It's easily the most lighthearted of all the Star Trek movies. There's just a lot of goofy comedy with them embarrassing themselves. But it starts with this probe flying through space that comes to Earth, and all the ships kind of like... And for whatever reason, that's the only thing that's really freaked me out in a movie ever. That. And like I remember watching that one with my parents in like 1989 and being like, I gotta get out of here. Star Trek IV.
Wow.
That's my answer.
Interesting. That's interesting.
Yeah, I don't have one because the regular horror films never scared me as a kid, so there was certainly not. I mean, I could think of movies or moments that were certainly like horror type scenes that kind of came out of nowhere, like the one I was just talking about from Temple of Doom.
Maybe that, someone did have one. We had a super chat come in. 1534. Judge Doom from Who Framed Roger Rabbit scared me. I'll double that.
That one's
did you guys get freaked out by him?
Oh yeah. Oh my god.
That was freaky too.
Yeah, it's terrifying. The other one that gets me, and actually subsequently it's a really good jump scare, is the one in Fellowship of the Ring where Bilbo like turns into a freaky demon. It's like, dude, every single time it gets me. I'm like, no, stop it. I don't want to see this. God.
Everybody always talks about that scene in Willy Wonka where they're on the little rowboat and he's like, we don't know which way we're rowing. And all the psychedelics going on.
Yeah.
All right. Durbin. Our buddy Durbin has joined. He's in the chat.
Hey, the Durbinator.
Durbania.
I'll throw from our buddy Ren. Opinions on Mirrors with Kiefer Sutherland. I have not seen Mirrors.
It's decent. It's
That's why it was important to have you on, Cody. It was like, you'll have seen everything.
There's actually a really good kill in that movie, where a girl looks into a mirror. Essentially, there's a ghost that has the power to make you do things with a reflection. So if you can see, like, either with the reflection of water or a mirror, the ghost can, mess with your reality. There's a kill where a girl's looking into a mirror and her reflection grabs her jaw and literally tears it open, and she's in the bathtub and like her jaw's just coming off. She doesn't know why. It's a decent movie. It's watchable. It's not one that I would say is like a must watch, but if you got nothing else going on and it's on TV, it's not one you turn away from.
I'm pretty sure the trailer for it was on one of the movies I watched for this 31 on 31. Mm-hmm. I don't think I wasn't aware of this movie, and then I saw the trailer for it. I was like, this has some people in it I recognize. How have I not seen this before? But I could just be confused because I watched a lot of horror movies over the last month. So from different eras too. John Sebastian DeJesus says, what is your favorite George A. Romero zombie movie? Dawn of the Dead. Both of them are, I thoroughly enjoy the Dawn of the Deads, but it's just a really good, basically that, the original Night of the Living Dead, of course, created this genre, but really Dawn of the Dead established so much of what all of these movies do, in so many different regards, to the level that, like, when they're doing the Dead Rising games 25 years later, what is it? It's Dawn of the Dead, the game, and it's a fantastic formula for the game. And then of course the remake was done by Zack Snyder, and I thought he did a great 21st century spin on it.
Love that movie.
Yeah, it's really good.
Yeah, I agree with you. I have not seen the last three, I think, of the Dead movies. I'm in the middle of that review
footage
series.
Ones?
Yeah, Survival of the Dead and Diary of the Dead. Maybe I'm missing one. Maybe it's just two that's left.
Have you seen Land?
I have seen Land.
Okay. I think there's two that are actually completed, and I think he wrote a third one. I could be getting my numbers wrong.
Okay, yeah.
So there's a third one that's written, that there's a guy that's trying to get it made.
Gotcha. Okay, so I got two more. So I've not seen those. I don't imagine they would take the top spot anyway. But yeah, Dawn of the Dead is definitely the one that I think is the best, just because it has it's a movie that does well with the social commentary that it's going for, because it's so subtle. If you want to go for that, you can easily latch into it, enjoy the movie for that. If you just want to watch it as a zombie movie, it doesn't get in the way. I like the characters in it. Aside from some of the dated effects with like the blue zombies and stuff, the practical effects with the gores is pretty good. But I'm a pretty big fan of Day of the Dead too. I just reviewed that one. I'm wearing the shirt right now, actually, of Bub. For some reason, it's not as good as Dawn of the Dead, but for some reason, there's parts of it that are just more memorable. They just stick in my head more. The practical effects, especially like with the gore in Day of the Dead, is like some of the best I've ever seen, even compared to modern stuff, where people are just literally getting their faces torn, and you're just how did they do that?
Yeah, that one at the end with the was it the douchebag? Was he general, whatever his rank is, in the hallway?
Guy that's always screaming the entire movie.
And then they catch him in the.
They just pull everything.
Pull him apart.
So I like those two quite a bit. Night of the Living Dead is one of those movies I respect more than I enjoy.
Right.
I saw it way too late in life, and by the time we've had decades of zombie movies come around, it's hard for me to go back and watch the basic little bottle movie that created the genre, because it seems, I don't want to say boring, but it seems kind of too small scale by comparison to what I expect a zombie movie to be.
Right. Well, Gavin the Geek kind of throws this one in there. Dawn of the Dead, 1978, in my honest opinion, is really overrated. I prefer the remake. I think those are tough statements to make, because you don't have the genre as we know it. It's kind of like it was the thing that made it so we have everything else. Yeah. You don't have obviously you don't have the remake if you don't have the original.
I will say this in regards to that statement. I think that a version of that I agree with, and that's the camp that says that the original Dawn of the Dead is great and the remake is terrible. And it's like, I don't know if you can have both of those statements make sense to me.
Yeah. And I know what you like. I'm not the best at watching older films, And so like when I watch movies from the 1940s and like it's the pacing and everything, it's tough for me to kind of move at that speed. And so I get a lot of that if you go back and you just watch the movie, but the movie is so important for the entire zombie genre. Like how, like all of the tropes of the zombie genre, everything, like the whole concept of The Walking Dead goes back to 1978. And of course, Night of the Living Dead too. But I totally get if your thought is, oh yeah, the remake is way more watchable. I mean, I watched the remake a lot more than I watched the 1978 one.
Yeah. Totally
get that. So I'd push back a little bit in that regards of like, I don't know if that's the language I would use, but I get your point. Try to take a couple more questions in here, and then we'll close out. What horror movies are you watching this week, Mr. Schiller?
Oh gosh, I don't even. What was the last horror movie I watched? I've been sort of just like. Actually, let's pull up my Letterboxd. I'll find out there. Hold on. So this is why I have it, because then I can keep track, and then for moments like this where I need to pull it out, boom, there we go. Let's see. Oh, I just rewatched Constantine. That is a good movie, and I will hear nothing other than praise for that film.
You will hear nothing but praise from that film from me.
Yeah, I really don't understand like the hate that it got, to be honest with you. I just think
because he doesn't have blonde hair.
Yeah, all the complaints are just like super, just like surface level, just garbage. It doesn't matter. He's not British and he doesn't have blonde hair. It's a very like, I feel like it tackles American cynicism just like the comic version tackles like the British cynicism. I don't know. And it's the other thing that I love about it is it's not, as opposed to every other like comic book movie that came out in the early 2000s that was like really like edgy and like action packed. This is like, it's a detective film for like 90% of it. And then there are like the cool little action set pieces. And so like you bring someone like Keanu Reeves in there who's known for his physical acting when it comes to action, and you sort of just let him play like a normal guy. Like he's like charismatic and he's still doing a lot of physical acting, but I don't know. And then I also just really enjoy the, the sort of like existential crisis of faith that he goes through as a character in that film. It's got some great sequences. And then when Lucifer comes in at the end, oh my God, it's such a, for a climax to a superhero film, it's such a breath of fresh air because it's not action packed. It's all like conversations and like using the hero's wit and intellect to defeat the villain. So I don't know. I've always loved that, and it has been years since I saw it last. And rewatching it this past week, I was like, man, that is really good. I loved it. Mm-hmm.
I haven't seen Constantine.
Oh my God.
Sean.
I've seen the animated movie that was a CW internet series. Does that count as watching the movie?
I think Sean Chandler needs to stop talking about movies and start watching some.
I would have seen it already.
Sleepy Hollow and Constantine tonight.
Yes.
Please. It's interesting with horror movies in particular, where like I could list off all these obscure things I have seen, but there's always so many more things that I haven't. Now I would have seen Constantine because I was going to watch all the DC movies to rank them after Wonder Woman came out. And then 2020 happened.
Well, you should still watch it while you can because it's festive. But
it's true. It's true. I've intentionally, after finishing this 31 on 31, and I accidentally had that one and this Liam Neeson video I was doing, a Star Trek video. So I had like 50 movies I had to watch in October. Ooh. So like I'm intentionally like not doing any of that for November. Like
Sean's read books all November.
Sean, rank all the Keanu Reeves movies.
Every single time, if he's appeared in any of it, I want you to rank it as your next video, not just at some point, as my next video.
Yeah. Outside of Constantine, I've been watching a lot of Tim Burton and Mike Flanagan. Like I watched Gerald's Game. That the handcuff wrist scene is I can't watch that. That's pretty gnarly. Sweeney Todd, I love. The Witches is absolute garbage, so there's that.
Yeah, The Witches was great. I loved it too. Amazing. Remember the part when they're like, dog droppings? That's it. That's my review. All right, let's close things out. Cody, where can we find you on the internet? And once again, sell us on this 31 on 31.
All right. You can find me by searching my name, or you can just go to youtube.com/Cody Leach channel. It'll take you right to me. And yes, join me and Sean and CP and Brian in 2 days on the 31st. All throughout the day, we're going to be dropping our individual rankings for 31 on 31, which is a now annual little event that we do. And we've done 3 of them so far this year. So who knows what next year's going to have, where we take a bunch of franchises, we throw them into the pot, and we rank them against each other. And this year we're doing creature features. So we've got Alien, Predator, It, Jeepers Creepers, Jaws, Critters, Gremlins, and The Thing. So join us for that. Be a bloody good time.
And so because I'm joining in on that one, if you've been wondering, what does he think about Critters 3? You'll finally be able to know what I think about Critters 3.
Leo DiCaprio's first on-screen appearance.
Feature debut for Mr. DiCaprio, and to this day, still one of his best films. Griffin, where can we find you on the internet?
Yeah, you can find me over on the FilmSpeak channel. Like I said earlier in the stream, I just dropped a deep dive into Tim Burton's Sleepy Hollow. Definitely go check that out. I put a lot of time and effort into it. And then I'm also going to be dropping another video essay on Temple of Doom, either this Sunday or like early next week or something like that. So go head on over there. Keep an eye out for that. 2 videos that I'm very proud of that are coming your way very soon. And if you want to follow me on Twitter, you can follow me at Griff Schiller.
That'll do it for today's episode of the podcast. Thanks so much for tuning in. If you're listening to the audio version, be sure to leave a rating and review. Thank you so much for listening, and keep talking movies too much.